Hi, welcome to the series on Maker Education with Carol and Keith. So today I'm hanging around at the moment I've got it empty for a sec, my Raspberry Pi stroke 3D printing room. And I thought I'd do a quick short video today on how MakerED links to dual coding. So Alan Pavlovian in maybe 1980s-ish put together an educational theory based on dual coding. Now you probably know a bit about dual coding already, but Makerspaces use them really well. So if you've ever had the idea of somebody says to you the best one to use it is to analogize it kind of like a mnemonics. Mnemonics? I can never pronounce that. Is to think of it like that. If I say to you the word baker, and I just ask you to remember the word, the first thing you're going to do is think of a guy with a funny hat and covered in flour, and your brain makes mental links into that. The smell of, flour, or the look of a baker's hat, and the guy looks like a baker. It helps you remember because it makes these associative hooks into your memory. It helps with the cognition. So makerspaces are really good for that because obviously we use a lot of visual and a lot of physical and a lot of audio and various tools in creation. So I wanted to just point out to you a little bit on this idea of using more than one method. So when you talk about creating or making within lessons, this week I've been doing it with this piece of kit behind me, which is a resin printer. Thank you, Photocentric. And I do it with Raspberry Pis, and we do it with all kinds. But to make objects, literal objects, or to make items that are visually representational, they are auditory or any other type. And Alan called it in his research in dual coding this idea of chunks or images. So chunks of information that get put in the same sort of similar pattern. So if I just sit there and listen to you talk in a lesson, that's just one form of information that comes in, and then actually, am I going to remember that? This is an old adage that all our teachers know, if you tell me, I remember, but if I do it myself, it's that one. Okay, so there's a whole bunch of research, there goes my bell, that basically with makerspaces, when you use Kit, you can align them to. I'm going to talk a bit more, bit by bit, on various educational bits that actually work with makerspaces, and there is lots and lots of different research that works because we use lots of different tools. So I thought I'd do kind of like a really short kind of intro one for this one. So there's one. You probably hear the rattle of all my kids going out of school right now. So we'll have at least 3 or 4 of them try and get in here to see their current prints. So 3D printing is a perfect one for this. Whether you use an Ultimaker, whether you use a resin printer like this one behind me, when you print in objects, and we have a range of objects probably lurking around somewhere, I'll have to have a look in a bit. Objects are really easy because they produce this sense of something you can physically touch. It's one more of the senses to get into. It's very rare you can kind of like associate things with smell. However, saying that, probably you all remember that idea of the smell of Bunsen burners in a lab. Yeah, what can you remember? Experiments. That's why when we're scientists we say experiments work really well. So when you think about looking at what pedagogy you're going to apply to your makerspace, dual coding is a really good one to apply. I also use a whole bunch of stuff I've talked earlier on in the pedagogy about various things that you can use, but this one really appeals to me just because it's a real one about dealing with cognitive load. So what can you put in your kids' head, and what will they remember? What are the best kind of orders to put them in? Quite often you don't want to kind of overload them with too much information and not have it flow in so well. You've got to chunk quite carefully to get the best out of them. And also it leads to this idea of preference. Learning styles has long since gone out. Nobody thinks that that's real anymore. However, kids do have preferences. You watch kids have preferences to what type of information they like to receive and when. And in doing that, makerspaces are great places to test fit that. So this week, which is why I'm doing a short range one, I've been busy hashing through the endless data that Spark is producing left, right and centre. Looking at one point of it, or one part of our overarching study, is to look at the preference of skills, of tools, of best learning ways and methods and things that our students overarchingly like. Each makerspace has got to be very unique to the students in it. So you need to know your students. There's no point in me giving my students a huge amount of stuff on, AR, VR, or a huge amounts of stuff on, say, electronics or, soldering, if my kids don't have necessarily a preference for that. They learn all of the baseline tools, and we learn the basics in pretty much everything, at least a rounded amount. However, there are some areas that they have a particular preference in. 3D printing happens to be one of them for my lot. Electronics happens to be one of them for my lot. So my team are my school is a very preference electronics 3D printing type makerspace. Now, some of that can have a lot to do with the preference that you have. I personally have a preference for that. But over time, I've seen our own students' preferences start to adapt as well. Because you tend to do the things that you're confident in first, and then you tend to go look at the other stuff later. So it depends what order you do it in. So, when you do plan things, plan with this idea of not only reproduction, but this idea of leading on that dual coding method to teach. Teach that 3D printing with a physical element and, an audio material element to it. As they'll have the practical element to that as well. But also teach things like, we've been using Mathematica on Raspberry Pi. Teach that with it as well. So make sure you get those visuals, physicals, all, together, all going on at once, and preferably in, some of the ideas that they've got down there for dual coding, so you can kind of map the two of them together. This is, as I said, a bit of a short one, so forgive me. It's been a hectic first week back, as every teacher says across the country. So I hope you're well, and I'll see you next time. We've got still a line of people to talk to. If you haven't checked some of the others, please go back and check some of the other MakerED series. We were on, I don't know, about 8 or 9 now, so go check out the others for interviews with various makers and various people going on. And I hope you've had a wonderful Easter break. See you soon.